Greetings. Now, I don't want this channel to become dominated with just the debunkings of people who claim we're in hyperinflation and explanations of how quantitative easing does not cause aberrantly high inflations, even at the level of quantitative easing that has to be done. But since the entire media is screaming about hyperinflation and almost every finance-related YouTuber is also perpetuating this entirely false narrative, I kind of have to debunk this as prominent people continue to crop up, spouting the same easily debunked points. Also, the connection between technological deflation and monetary creation, also known as quantitative easing, is one of the biggest economic revelations of our age because it portends to so much about the future, yet almost nobody's talking about it other than those who have read my Atom publication. That is something we're going to have to talk about pretty frequently until this inflation hype dies down a fair bit, which will be by about April, May, June. A lot of the screeching about inflation will go silent, and the people who made predictions that turned out to be wrong will be nowhere to be found, but I'll be there to call them all out. So here we have YouTuber Stephan, and I have been an admirer of what he's accomplished with his channel for some time. In fact, if there's one YouTuber who I saw that inspired me to do my own YouTube channel, it's him, because he started on Christmas Day 2016, so almost 5 years ago, and just started posting videos about the most basic of finance items, and has gained a huge following. As you can see, he has 3.53 million subscribers, and through his channel and businesses associated with his channel, he is supposedly earning more than $500,000 per month. Not per year, $500,000 per month. And he represents the classic example of the $20 bill lying on the sidewalk. How the business person will just see the $20 bill, pick it up and move on, whereas the two academic economists will see it and then debate about whether the economy is efficient or not, or why it would be there, and not take advantage of that on their own. A lot of people see his channel and wonder, hey, I could have done that at that time, why didn't I? But, well, they didn't, and he did. And he's a real estate guy, certainly. But now, with his channel, what is remarkable is how much repetition there is. You can see his most recent videos, his most recent 18 videos, 24 videos. He's pretty much just talking about the same 4 or 5 things, and multiple videos about very obscure cryptocurrencies that if you haven't heard about, you're not missing anything. For example, Shiba Inu here, Shiba Inu here, all in Shiba Inu here. The freaky truth of Shiba Inu. So 4 of his last 18 videos are about something called Shiba Inu. And if you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. You're not missing anything. Otherwise, Bitcoin, 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 Bitcoin. Or otherwise, the stock market's going to crash, stock market's going to crash, stock market's going to crash. He just talks about the same thing, but he found a formula that works and has a huge number of subscribers. There's certainly many things that any YouTuber can learn from him. But unfortunately, he is also subject to the same misguided belief about inflation, or in fact hyperinflation. In fact, he splits the word into 2, hyperspace inflation, so he doesn't even know what the real word is. It's one word. So we go to his video. Now let me also say that with Stephan, I had thought the first video that I made would be one that is more of a tribute to him, given that he built a successful YouTube channel without having gone to college, and he did the right thing by not going to college. And I will do another video explaining how much he benefited by not going to college, and others should be inspired to do the same. Not everyone can get millions of subscribers, of course. There's a certain ratio between a creator and the number of fans. That means only a certain proportion of people can have that kind of audience, but there's a lot to learn from him on this. And let me also add that he is not nearly as bad as the Economics Explained channel, which I dismantle in this card up here, because Stephan is only saying there could be very high inflation, not that there already is. Economics Explained says that we are already in hyperinflation, and he has been saying that for almost a year, and none of the data seems to corroborate what he says. And he is an example of how people with economics degrees know absolutely nothing about the real economy and are just hyper-theoretical creatures and certainly don't know anything about investment. So on to Stephan.
You know, I usually intro my videos with a, "What's up you guys, it's Graham here." But the only thing up today is inflation, and it's getting much, much worse than most of us initially expected. Throughout the last week, it was revealed that prices have surged to their highest level in 30 years. The cost of living has increased 6.2% year over year, and even worse is that it's not expected to stop anytime soon. As we can already see, food prices are up another 8.6%. Gasoline rose 64% to its highest level in 7 years. Rents are up another 16.4% this year.
Okay, I'll stop right there. He is cherry picking the prices of things that have risen a lot and ignoring the things that have not risen in price. That is like saying that if you saw someone who is 7 feet tall, therefore all people are 7 feet tall. Plus, the highest price of gasoline in 7 years, that isn't a particularly long time. That's still a noise level increase, number one. And number two, the highest inflation in 30 years, that is also a very cherry-picked and misrepresented point. As you can see in my inflation debunking video over here, I do a monthly inflation report and I have a very solid quantitative metric of what inflation actually is every given month and whether it meets the criteria of high inflation, and that is at the index level and at the data level, not cherry picking things to push a narrative. So he's already just buying into the media narrative because that's what the YouTube algorithm rewards. But we continue.
Because let's be real, even though inflation is seemingly turned into a political negotiation tactic, there's a lot that they're not telling you. And the real answer is a lot worse than just printing a whole bunch of money, even though that's a part of it. Now, here's the big scary word that investors and politicians hate more than YouTube removing the dislike button, and that would be inflation. This is the rate that products and services increase in price over time, lowering the value of the money that you have today. Like, remember when your grandparents used to tell you stories about the old days when a movie would cost a quarter, or how a brand new Ferrari 250 GTO was only $18,000 when it first came out in 1962? Well, that doesn't exist anymore, thanks to inflation. It's generally thought that the more money gets printed into our economy, the more we devalue the existing currency in circulation. And over time, the more dollars it costs to buy the exact same thing. Now, historically, over the last 40 years or so, the rate of inflation has actually been consistently going down thanks to increasing efficiency. Meaning we're now able to produce much more for less, and our money isn't losing value as fast as it once did. But things are quickly starting to change. Now, on a large scale, inflation is really nothing new, and we've been seeing this every single year consistently since the beginning of time. It's why in 1955 a house cost $9,100, and now 66 years later it's $374,000. Or how a gallon of milk used to be 92 cents, and today it's $3.69 in California.
Okay, several problems with what was said over there. That chart that shows the dollar declining in value for the last century, that's absurd. That tries to imply to people that their prosperity is much lower than it was 100 years ago. That is crazy. The prosperity level of people, both in the United States and in almost all of the world, is much higher than it was a century ago. I have done an important video on the accelerating rate of economic progress, which everyone who's interested in finance and economics has to see. The rate of economic growth has not only been upward, but it has been rising exponentially. The notion that the dollar is being devalued over the last century is just a completely inverted and false narrative designed to scare people. I mean, the prosperity level a century ago was terrible by today's standards. Second problem, he said the price in 1955 of a gallon of milk was 92 cents and now is $3.69 per gallon. So it rose 4 times from 1955 to present. So in 66 years, the price of milk has risen 4 times. Salaries have risen a lot more than 4x in the United States between 1955 and present. So the price of milk rising 4x not only is net getting cheaper relative to the average income of people, but if you do the math of a quadrupling of price over 66 years, what does that come out to in terms of an annual growth rate? That comes out to only 2% a year. Steady 2% a year inflation. Also, the example of a Ferrari in 1955 versus the price of a Ferrari today is a terrible example because mechanically a 1955 car is extremely inferior in all engineering specifications relative to the same tier of car today. Take a like make and model, Ferrari versus Ferrari. A 1955 Ferrari had very, very poor engineering specs and would be considered a complete piece of junk from a mechanical and driving point of view today. The horsepower of that car relative to the Ferrari of today is extremely poor, and the price of the Ferrari, what you get today engineering wise versus 1955, is just streets ahead. Not to mention that the 1955 car didn't have any electronics to speak of in it, whereas the car of today, especially a Ferrari, would have all kinds of electronics. So there's no recognition of quality improvements and technological progress within the model. A 1955 car in relation to the incomes of people in 1955 is much more expensive relative to the engineering quality of the car versus today. A car was an extreme luxury at that time. Now it is a commodity. It's much more reliable. That is just a terrible example. So both of his examples, the Ferrari and the gallon of milk, are thusly debunked as examples of high inflation. But he's only talking about what the definition of inflation is, rather than these being proof of hyperinflation, to be fair. So we continue.
Anyway, right now, with inflation rising harder, better, faster, and stronger than the Federal Reserve initially anticipated, there's certainly the fear that it'll continue to grow out of control, it'll be too late to fix, and all of this comes right before another multi-trillion-dollar stimulus package. So what's going to happen? Well, the root cause of inflation seems to be broken down in 4 categories.
So in his video, he defined these 4 potential causes of inflation, and he gave an academic definition, which was not incorrect by any means. However, there are a couple of important nuances that he's forgotten about. He's only considering demand of hard goods that have to be manufactured and shipped. He is not considering demand of anything software oriented. Now, not everything in the world is software. Only 3% of the entire world's economy is high tech. But that is still a significant enough percentage to completely bypass these various factors that cause inflation that is associated with physical goods. That is a major robustification of the economy because software doesn't get blocked at a port and doesn't have to be shipped and is immune to a trucker's strike. And when the demand for a software product rises, the price does not rise. If Netflix got a huge number of new subscribers tomorrow, they are not going to increase the price of a Netflix subscription. Software is dematerialized, and dematerialization is a crucial feature of the high-tech age and why the connection between technological deflation and monetary creation has emerged and is accelerating exponentially. Also, he talks about supply chain. Now, that can be a factor, and remember, I say that one of the only things that actually can cause inflation is governmental mismanagement, and this is an example of that. Governmental mismanagement is causing some price increases across some parts of the supply chain, but those, of course, are also temporary because as soon as the supply chain's efficiency is restored, prices drop back down. Also, there are so many types of products available that people have an alternative and even another alternative to almost anything they could buy, with relatively few exceptions. Therefore, people can migrate their demand away from things that are rising in price because of extreme supply chain issues that are going to be temporary for a while. Among the few exceptions to this are gasoline if you have an internal combustion engine car, and we'll talk about that. But supply chain is being overrated as a reason for sustained hyperinflation. Remember, this is a temporary thing, yet everyone's talking about hyperinflation as though it's going to happen soon. And also remember that the definition of hyperinflation, which Stephan did not define, is that hyperinflation is 50% price increases in a month, not a year, in a month. At the moment, we're not even close to 1% in an individual month in price increases. But anyway, these are the first 4 things he spoke about, and his definitions of each of those 4 were academically correct, even if he is overemphasizing the impact of each. But now he goes to his 5th factor, which is one that I've shot down in a video in the past, and it is something that the Economics Explained channel has also used as an excuse about why the inflation that he was predicting was not showing up, and that is shrinkflation. So see this video where I demolished the entire shrinkflation narrative, and unfortunately Stephan also goes into claiming that shrinkflation is a huge factor.